So you've written books, blog posts, columns for many years. What made you decide to start writing a newsletter on top of that? And how did you grow your list initially?
I decided to start a newsletter. Actually, I had a weekly column at the On Being Project, which is mostly known as a podcast, but actually has a pretty robust website as well. And I'd done that for years and had built up this really wonderful audience there. And then On Being decided not to do any columnists anymore, have any columnists. And so I was trying to think, like, how do I sort of transfer this wonderful group of readers somewhere else? And I'd always been a little reluctant about a newsletter just because it sounded like a lot of work. And I was kind of like, can I keep up with it? I have two small children and, all these things going on. But I thought, okay, I'll just take the leap and do it. And at first I did it on MailChimp. And it was fine. I found the back end deeply confusing, but I sort of just like stayed in my one little piece of it and tried to like ignore the rest. And I had a pretty good experience. But then when Substack was created and I started to sort of find some of the people I'm most interested in writing there. I think I'm actually a pretty early adopter of Substack from what I understand, and talked to a friend of mine who worked there that I know through literary circles, Fiona, who's so wonderful. I was like, this feels intuitively so much more sort of how I think about the world and also technically designed for someone like me. Who I actually have worked on the back end of websites, in my early blogging days, but it wasn't something I had the bandwidth to do at this point and needed something like really straightforward and, human-centered design and just like, let me do my thing. And so the transition first to just having a unpaid, non-subscriber, subscriber, but unpaid subscribers crew was very fluid. It felt so easy to switch over, which I was shocked about. I was sort of gearing up for all the technical disasters that always seem to happen. And it was just like, my list went straight from MailChimp into Substack and that was that. And I always found the back end profoundly easy to use. From kind of just like a bandwidth issue, which you asked about, I think for me, the biggest pain of freelancing has always been the pitching. I've never worked on a staff. I've always been a freelancer. And I've spent, probably years of my life pitching into black holes, like email black holes where no one gets back to me. And I think I have this great idea. And so taking the pitching out of writing for me is just like such a gift. The other thing is some of those pitches are probably good, but there are also a lot of things I just could never pitch that I write about at Substack. Like this week, I had this thought where I was like, everyone's really sad. And we're all like, we've been called to be so creative for these 8 months of sheltering in. Like we keep trying to reinvent everything, like reinvent the baby shower, like reinvent what, and it's just like, I'm fucking tired of reinventing shit. Like I'm just sad and everyone else is sad. And I'm just going to tell people that. So like, that's something you would never pitch to an editor. You'd never be like, I have this novel idea about the fact that like everyone's sad and tired of being creative. They'd be like, what? But with Substack, I can just like write that weird little idea in like 45 minutes, add some pictures from my iPhone and 10,000 people read it. And like a lot of those people are paying me to have that weird, strange thought and getting it on the page. So for me, it's just like this incredible way to live my medium. Like I live the medium. I just like pay attention to my life and write things. Sometimes I do things that are more elaborate. I do these Q&As with people or other things that require a little bit more labor. But a lot of it for me is just like a very organic, rewarding experience of, observing the world around me, writing it down and seeing what resonates with people.
And so you wrote free posts for a really long time before you launched your paid subscriptions. Why did you decide to end up adding paid subscriptions, and how did you know when you were ready?
I didn't really know if I was ready. I feel like I just sort of hit a moment where I was like, I was in constant conversation with Fiona about it and she was helping me figure that out. But so I knew it's like you should have a certain, it's good to have a certain number of unpaid subscribers before you ask for people to pay, et cetera. But it was more of an intuitive thing. It was like, I've been doing this for a while. People seem to really be appreciating it. I know I really like to support writers and artists and, musicians or whoever that's doing something that feeds me. And I was just getting such profoundly gracious feedback from people. And I was like, I feel like, I'm not someone who's particularly comfortable asking for people for money. So that, I did have sort of a psychic block of like, am I really going to ask people to pay for this thing that I've been doing for free? But I ended up feeling like, I believe in people getting paid for their labor. And as joyful as the labor is for me, it is labor. And I have, a crazy life. Like I said, 2 small kids, I'm writing, I literally during sheltering, I had been writing in a 1975 VW bus parked in my driveway because it's the only place where they'll leave me alone. But I just felt like, I should be paid. This is like on some level a feminist issue of just like, I need to be paid for my work, and an issue of sort of the gift economy. Like I believe in asking for help and support when you need it and giving help and support when you can. And so it just felt kind of congruent. It just sort of felt right. And I was totally amazed at the response. Like people just, and I did the, monthly option or the yearly option, and, the option to be kind of like a super subscriber, like paying, in my case, I think it's $100. And I was just like so amazed at how many people were automatically like, I'll pay $100. And I'm just like so flattered, so moved. Like it's just such a, money is just one currency. Obviously, I'm much more invested in like love and discussion and, changing hearts and minds and all these other things that I think of as like metrics of my work. But it would be naive to say that it didn't feel amazing to be like, oh, people actually consider this worth paying for. And this supports me to do the kind of thinking that helps me write this kind of stuff. So that was really moving. The other thing that I got a lot of was people buying subscriptions for friends, which is so moving to me. Like it actually grew my audience to ask for money because it, I think, sort of made people realize like, oh yeah, this is labor that she puts into this. I mean, the real like hallmark of amazing writing and something I aspire to is writing that feels effortless because it's so organic and beautiful and it kind of lands in your inbox and you're just like, oh my gosh, that's what I was thinking. Like, how did you put this into words? Which is, I'm so honored that is the kind of feedback I get when I get it right. But I do think that it's kind of a double-edged sword because then it makes people feel like it's hardly labor because the whole point of it is to make it not look like super laborious, right? So there's something about asking for the money that I think reminds people like, oh, this isn't that easy. Like every week, this woman figures out how to say something to me that, it may not resonate every week, but like, let's say the majority of times it like feeds me in some way. So that was great. And then like giving subscriptions to friends. I had I did the thing that a lot of folks do, which is say, if you can't afford a subscription, please let me know. And few people did that. And I was just like overjoyed to be like, of course, I'll give you a free subscription. So that felt great. Yeah, it was just like this great affirmation of what I'm doing. I think one other thing I was worried about asking for paid subscriptions is like, now this is a real duty and responsibility. Like if people are paying me, I feel like I like really need to show up and produce quality content. And so that made me a little worried. I can imagine other people being worried about just sort of like it's a contract of a certain type, right? Whereas when it's unpaid, you feel like you have a little more flexibility to be flaky. But ultimately that was okay with me. I have a pretty regulated life and I'm a pretty prolific writer. So I was like, I'm going to show up for people. Like, I don't think this is a big problem. The other thing I did that has really energized me, and I don't know if other people have done this or not, is I have these Q&As twice a month that I run. It's like on a Friday and I just ask someone really cool 5 questions, usually activists or organizers or nonprofit directors. And then I make donations to their organization of choice using the subscription revenue that I have. So, and I say to my subscribers, like, we together are donating to this person, and please feel free to donate even more to this person, but like, just so you know, your subscription a percentage of that goes to these organizations. So that's been a cool, just sort of like, it's just sort of like a little bit of reappropriation or like trying to kind of get money flowing to people that I think are amazing. So that's been fun, a little bit of a creative twist that people could borrow if they wanted.
That's so cool. Can you talk a little bit about which types of content you've decided to make free versus paid? You're talking about the Q&As and the posts.
Yeah, so I do 3 things. I do a essay on Wednesday mornings that again can be as random as like people are sad and they're allowed to be, to more developed things. Like right after the election, I wrote a piece that turned out to be a bit controversial about like, this message around bridging in some ways is very insensitive because we just experienced an administration who is basically like dehumanizing people, and then we're asking those same people to like bridge with Trump voters. So sometimes I go political. Most of the time it's sort of a mix of like personal and political. So those essays come out Wednesday mornings, and then and that's unpaid, that's to everybody. And then Fridays, twice a month, I do these Q&As that I just mentioned. That's paid. Although there have been times when I've been like, I really want everyone that subscribes to me to know about this person, so I'm going to send it to everyone. And that's one of the nice things about Substack is like, it's your discretion. So it's not like you have to ask for permission to do that. You just, if there's something that's in the paid content bucket, but you decide like, this is too important, like you're the boss, right? So that's really nice. And then Sundays, I do this weird thing where I do Insta stories of the New York Times. And then I take 5 of those like Insta story snapshots and load them up into Substack and send a thing on Sunday. So basically like sort of like a New York Times Sunday digest, but like the quirkiest kind you can imagine. I don't aim to be like, these are these stories you have to know. It's more like this, like I have a thing of, this is the artist I want to have a whiskey with this week from the art section, or like things like that. So that goes to paid subscribers as well. Although my Instagram people could, if they wanted, like access some of that content.
Can we talk a little bit about your the actual like moment of your launch? Because I thought that you launched this really wonderful announcement that just felt super authentic to your style, your voice, your audience. Can you just like walk us through that launch a little bit? How did you decide what to include in your announcement, and the approach and the pitch that you decided to take?
I really love the idea of like building community. Community is kind of like my religion. And so I watched how other people were doing that on Substack, and that just really resonated with me. I don't think I do have a fairly active audience, like commenting audience, but nothing compared to some people. But I was like, I do feel like this is kind of a crew, like these same people. There are a bunch of people who will comment like every single week, and I've never met them. They're perfect strangers, but I feel like, oh, here's Vicky. Like, Vicky's a grandma somewhere because she's always talking about being a grandma. And like, so I do feel this sense of like, we're a crew of people who somehow the like place where we all meet is my voice and my sensibility and what I'm like putting out in the world in these newsletters. And so I do really like the idea of thinking about it as a community with some kind of shared sensibility, whatever we call that. I mean, my thing is obviously called the examined family. So I'm thinking about like, how do we really live an examined life. But in my case, I write a lot about my kids and parenting and power and race and that kind of stuff. And I also, like I said, I did think a lot about it just as myself, as a appreciator of art and writing and music, and thought like, how do I feel about the stuff I subscribe to or pay for? And it's a joy for me to pay for things that feed my life and feed me and I care about, and music I like to dance to, and art I appreciate. And like, of course I want to pay those people. Like, it's such a wonderful gift that they give me. So I tried to get myself in that mindset rather than thinking of it as like a super capitalistic, like I'm monetizing my readers, which, on some level you could say I am. But I meant it. It was authentic, that I felt like it was a way of saying like, I get something out of paying for the art I love, and I hope you do too. Like, if so, awesome. If you can't afford it, again, like you said, then let me know. That I don't want money to be a barrier to entry to anyone to be reading me or a part of the conversation. And so yeah, it just kind of felt right in that regard. But I really worked hard on that. As much as I don't even remember what it says, and I appreciate you reminding me, I did work really hard on it, and I showed it to a bunch of people, because it is a hard thing to do. I think, especially for individual writers who are used to someone else, a literary agent or a editor, a publisher, or someone else who's in the business of it. It can be, I think, feel a little bit weird to be the one to do it.
Is there anything, just sort of thinking back to your launch, that you thought went really, really well, or that you might have done differently if you were to do it again?
What I just said about asking a bunch of people, that felt important. I asked people who are quite different from one another, like somebody who's like a fundraiser in my life, like she does nonprofit fundraising, but so she'd have that thing, or like someone who's like kind of a, you know, like socialist artist who's like, fuck money, you know, because I wanted to be like, what do a range of people in my life hear or see when they experience this message? So that I think is good, because then you just feel like, okay, you've gotten a sense of, before you hit send and kind of worry about going public with it, you've had a little bit of practice tweaking it and kind of responding to people's thoughts. So that feels important. I'm still not totally clear. I guess this is less of something I would do differently or that went well, but I guess a question I'm still holding. And I'd be curious what you think from a Substack perspective, or, you know, if others have sort of said this, is like, I think what I am in giving people paid and unpaid makes sense, but I'm really not sure. Like, part of me is like, maybe I should just make it all go to everybody, and it's just more of like a gift economy thing, where it's like, if you want to support me, then you pay for this whole like set of things that other people get for free, and you're fine with that because you're like, I like the idea of paying for the labor that goes behind the work I do. So I don't know if you guys have landed anywhere as your pattern keeping about that, but I've had moments where I'm like, why do I just send the Sunday thing to paid subscribers? I could just as well send it to everybody, but I haven't done so. Anyway, I don't know, do you have any thoughts about that?
We do see most writers with paid subscriptions do a mix of free and paid content like you're doing, but we also have seen writers on either extreme. Some people are doing all paid content and nothing free, and then we also see people that are doing all free, and you know, if you're paying, it is more of like a gift, like you're saying. And so I think it really depends on your audience and what people want from you. There's no like sort of universal right, which is something I personally really love about Substack. Is like, you get to decide that, right, of like, this feels right to you. And I could see for your kind of audience where you might just say like, this is all free and you can pay if you'd like. But yeah, and I guess I would just sort of defer to the feedback that you get from readers and what feels good to you. But
yeah, I think one other thing I've been surprised by is like, or I guess confused by, is how much content people actually want. Like Fiona and I had lots of conversations where I'd be like, people really cannot possibly want to hear from me multiple times a week. And she's like, I think they do. I was like, really? Like, I would be like so annoyed by certain voices in my inbox multiple times a month. But then it's like, well, then you don't subscribe to them, you know? So I think that's a thing I'm still feeling out too, is like, how much of my voice and sensibility do my readers and my subscribers actually want? You know, I saw that Cheryl Strayed had started a Substack thing, and she was doing, I think, like 4 times a year. Is that right? I don't know if you have followed that, but anyway, it was like very infrequently, and I was like, oh, that's fascinating. You know, she's Cheryl Strayed, obviously, but I like writing pretty frequently, but I don't know, that is kind of a question I'm holding of like, isn't that interesting that people seem to want more frequent contact, at least according to Fiona, than I would have guessed. And then like, how do you gauge as the writer of that, like, how is this feeling for you guys? So I may at some point soon do kind of like a survey of some kind, like where I just say, hey, this is a community thread, like what's working, what's not, how much content do you want? The other thing I've been thinking about doing, and I haven't decided exactly how yet, but is I like, it's the end of the year, and this is the first year that I had paid subscribers, and I was like, I really want to thank everybody, and I don't have enough subscribers to make that truly crazy. I mean, it will be a big labor, but I've been thinking like, maybe I'll send everybody just one individual, like really short email, but like a customized email where I say just something. And like the Vickies of the world, like the people who are true strangers, but like, I'd be like, you know, hope grandma life is going well. So she knows like, I actually do pay attention to these comments. And that's another thing. I feel a real duty to be in the comments section and like people's comments and respond to them, because I just feel like that means so much to me when I feel like people actually pay attention to comments. And I think that's, if we're going to ask for people to pay money and say it's a community, we kind of got to show up like that.
Yeah, especially for your sort of audience, I can imagine. I mean, you are really just building this like community of readers that are coming over a shared sort of experience and desire to understand something in the world. So
Yeah.
that's really cool to hear. Yeah, the last question before we wrap up is just sort of generally, what advice do you have for writers that are thinking about launching paid subscriptions but are just feeling nervous about going all in?
I think I would just say, put yourself in the mindset and like the heart space of yourself as a consumer of and an audience, you know, of art that you love, of books that you love, of content that you love, and try to remember that that's who you are for the people who will choose to subscribe. I think, I mean, it's sort of a depressing way to be, but my kind of way of approaching my work is always like have real low expectations. Like if I put, whenever I write a book, I'm always like, if one person finds this useful, because I'm going to find it useful. I write books I need to read. So like, there's no question I'm going to find this useful. But if like one other person emails me and is like, this really helped me, that's like worth it for me. So the nice thing about having expectations that low is it doesn't become a big ego thing. It's just like, so for me, it was like, if anybody feels like subscribing paid, that will be such a like wonderful surprise and honor to me. And then, you know, when hundreds do and thousands do, then you're just like, holy shit, like what an incredible gift. So for me, it's like, to emotionally survive it, I just don't get real involved in like having a huge ambitious number. Maybe that is not smart and strategic, and like someone I, you know, would be happy to entertain that. That's part of why I like don't have a million followers or something, but like, I just want to connect with the people who authentically connect with my work and be very grateful that they're up for paying for it and that I get to do this work at all, which just feels like a miracle to me. Like I didn't come from a family of artists or writers. So I'm like, I can't believe I, you know, pay my mortgage with this kind of work. So yeah, I think just to be authentically grateful and, you know, and aiming to be useful, but not getting your ego involved in it or, you know, depending on it in any, I think, you know, as your audience grows over time, as the money grows over time, obviously you can integrate it into your life and how you think about what you need to live on and pay for and that kind of thing. But starting out with sort of a low stakes, you know, start it before you like are desperately in need of the money so that you can be grateful. And if you have that option, I know some people don't, but so that you can be grateful and just kind of build it and not feel crushed if it like doesn't meet particular metrics or something. I think just like trying to be as organic and in a space of graciousness as possible is the way to go.
That's really great advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.